Joe Biden has done the closest thing he could do to saying, it, I'm out of here. And so no wonder the American people are thinking, well, I don't know what we trust anymore. I don't know if this system's fit for purpose. Maybe it actually isn't.
Before you watch today's episode, we want to remind you that tickets are on sale for the Newsagents live shows with HSBC UK. We're kicking off our tour at the Birmingham Symphony Hall on February the 17th. Then we're off to the Bridgewater Hall in Manchester the following week on the 24th. And finally, the Usher Hall in Edinburgh on March the 11th. Head over to Global Player to get your tickets for any of these dates. The link will be in the description below, and we're very excited to see you there.
Questions? Yes, Bolton.
Do you agree with some of your Democratic colleagues who say that President Biden's pardon of Hunter Biden was wrong or unwise or puts personal interest ahead of duty?
I got nothing for you on that.
Can I follow up on that? Are you concerned with the lack of transparency, lack of honesty around Biden's decision to pardon?
As I said, I got nothing for you on that. Nope.
That was Chuck Schumer, America's third most powerful Democrat. And as you heard, he has nothing to say when asked to respond to Joe Biden's pardoning of his own son, Hunter, which came this weekend.
Now, Chuck Schumer is not a man who has few opinions. He has very many opinions as the Senate leader of the Democrats. But on this, it is excruciating because Democrats don't know what to say, don't know which way to turn, following the shock news that after months of saying he would not pardon his son, he has. So is this really damaging now for the Democratic Party? Welcome to the Newsagents USA.
The Newsagents USA.
It's John.
It's Emily. And I guess what is odd about the pardon was it came after Thanksgiving weekend, late Sunday evening, just before Joe Biden hopped on a plane to Angola, and it kind of came out of the blue. And he had always said that he would allow the rule of law to take its course when a jury, convicted his only surviving son, Hunter Biden, of crimes to do with tax and gun ownership, gun purchasing. And out of nowhere came this U-turn by Joe Biden, sitting president, who has in his power the gift of pardoning of whoever he wants, and he hasn't actually pardoned very many. And suddenly we learn that Joe Biden has decided his one existing son should not face prison after he leaves office.
And of course, you can understand that as a father, that you want to do that for the son, particularly a family like the Biden family that has been through such unbelievable torture and tragedy along the way, and that Hunter Biden has had a troubled kind of few years and is emerging out of it and feels passionately that the only reason that he was prosecuted was because his surname was Biden and therefore wanted to do the best for his son Hunter. But when you have made the case throughout your whole presidency that what marks you out from Donald Trump is your respect for the rule of law, for due process, for letting the courts do their work, that to suddenly at this late stage say, yeah, I know I said all that, but frankly, I'm going to pardon him anyway. And the manner of the pardon itself is also incredibly wide-reaching because it pardons him for anything he may have done in the past 10 years. So if a new Attorney General found out that Hunter Biden had done something absolutely egregious, you can't go after him for that 10-year period.
Yeah, and look, this comes back to something we talk about so often when we're kind of dealing with Trump versus Biden, which is asymmetric warfare. On the one hand, it makes President Biden look like a total hypocrite, yes, but he is up against a man who's faced 34 convictions, who's faced fraud trials, who has been convicted, found liable for sexual abuse, for rape, for defamation, who has attempted to overturn an election. And it has a little bit of the whiff of in the Hillary days of but her emails, as if we're trying to find the thing on the other side that makes Hunter Biden or Joe Biden just as bad. And there is no just as bad. You just cannot equate them.
Yeah, I think you and I don't see eye to eye on this. I think that what Joe Biden has done is terrible in practical political terms for the Democratic Party. How can it stand up now and say, we are the party of law and order, we are the party that believes in due process, we are the party that believes in following the rules, when Joe Biden has done this, having said that he absolutely wouldn't do it?
Because the party carries on without Joe Biden, and the party will have to redefine itself in a post-Joe Biden world, whatever. And Joe Biden has done the closest thing he could do to saying, it, I'm out of here, and I'm not going to sacrifice my son.
Look, I understand the personal element of it. I just think that for the Democratic Party, and you can, Chuck Schumer was diplomatic compared to an awful lot of other politicians who have spoken out and saying this is a huge mistake. This is an absolute gift to Trump. Trump's claims now that it was all a witch hunt against him have been reinforced. And I think the really corrosive bit about it is that if you are American, you surely look at your justice system and think it is bust. There's nothing that works. There is no such thing as justice. How can you have a lawful society when the people who live in it think that law is not applied in a colourblind manner?
But Trump was just about to appoint Matt Gaetz to be head of the Justice Department. He did fail. And so now he's got a woman who's coming in who probably also doesn't believe that Biden was the legitimate president, who's also got on record to say that Trump won the election last time around. And so we're talking about degrees, right? We're talking about degrees of egregiousness, quite frankly. And so no wonder the American people are thinking, well, I don't know what we trust anymore. I don't know if this system's fit for purpose. Maybe it actually isn't.
Well, we are joined now by Representative Jasmine Crockett. She sits in the House of Representatives and is a member for Texas's 30th District, but she was also, really importantly, national co-chair for the Harriz Walz 24 campaign. And Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us on the news agents. It's great to have you with us. Look, hasn't Joe Biden just evacuated the moral high ground for Democrats by pardoning his son Hunter?
Absolutely not. Listen, first of all, I don't know how much y'all have kept up. I'm going to assume that y'all have kept up with what's going on in the United States, but I think there is no moral high ground anymore when it comes to politics in this country. We have someone who has been convicted of 34 felonies and had so many other felonies that were pending, and now that person is going to become the president of the United States. Not to mention, while you guys are obviously in Europe, you are not France. We know that the incoming administration, the incoming president, has decided that his child's father-in-law is going to be the ambassador for France, and this is someone that he pardoned. So listen, we know that there is a history of pardoning family members, but more importantly, in this particular pardon, as someone who serves on the oversight committee, I can tell you that they only went after Hunter because his last name was Biden. Now, does that eliminate the fact that a jury came together and decided that he was guilty of a crime? Absolutely not. But when we know that these are crimes that people normally would not be charged with, that's a little bit different. It's like we have so many states that have things like adultery on the books, but they never prosecute it. And if you actually prosecuted the case, then yes, juries most likely would find somebody guilty of adultery. But just because it's on the books, when we know that in practice that no one is actually prosecuted for this, I absolutely think that this is the type of case that would qualify even if it wasn't his son.
Jasmine, I'm wondering if this says to you that Joe Biden is leaving the office of president without any real confidence in the rule of law in America, in a future administration. I mean, the fact that he said so many times that Hunter Biden would not be pardoned, would go through due process, had been convicted by his peers, suggested that he believed in the direction America was taken. Now, either he's a hypocrite or else he's somebody who is betraying, I guess, a sense that he has no faith left in the system anymore. Do you think that's right?
Well, I will tell you this. I have no faith in this incoming administration. And I personally believe, I've not talked to the president. I'll see him here in a couple of days, actually. So I've not talked to him since this happened. I personally believe that when the president said that he had no intentions of pardoning his son, that he absolutely believed that in that moment. And I also know that at that moment, he was running to succeed and get a second term. And so I definitely felt like it's a little different when you know that you are the one that is going to appoint who is going to be serving over the Department of Justice and things like that. And then things started to change. Next thing you know, we ended up with Vice President Harriz as our nominee. And then next thing you know, Trump has become now the president-elect. And then the next thing you know, Trump has started to put people such as the first pick that he had for Attorney General was Matt Gaetz. And that went up in flames. And now he has Pam Bondi, and he now wants to put Kash Patel over the FBI. I think that things are unraveling in real time. And I think that he absolutely made the right decision when he decided to change course and said, never mind, I'm going to protect my family. But also, when it comes to like political capital, this is a man who's leaving the White House and he is done with politics.
But surely you would accept that the charge of hypocrisy stands. He says one thing, he's done another.
Yeah, I think that if people want to call him hypocritical, that is absolutely their prerogative. But I also want to be clear that if we are talking about a pardon, we're talking about someone who has gotten caught up in the system in some way. Because I know a little bit earlier, there was the question about believing in the rule of law. If for some reason someone has been pardoned, we know that there has been some sort of legal process in some way that has taken place. And that's the only time that we actually need a pardon. But yeah, I think that it's okay. If people call him a hypocrite, that is perfectly fine. And as someone who is over 80 years old and is done with politics, I don't think that Joe Biden is going to miss any nights of sleep because people call him a hypocrite.
He may be done, but he's left quite a problem for his party. I mean, if you look
I don't
at
think so.
Gavin Newsom's response, if you look at Chuck Schumer's response, Chuck Schumer couldn't find anything to say about that. Gavin Newsom has pushed back. There is a whole generation of Democrats now who have to fight the narrative that he's left them, which is that they're just as bad. You know, they don't stick to their word. They tear up the rule book.
I don't think so. I mean, I think at this point in time, people are individuals, and this was a father who happened to be a president who made a decision. And I think that the smartest thing for Democrats, if they feel as if, you know, now we are all tied to what Joe Biden did, if you want to separate yourself, then you go ahead and separate yourself and say that he's an individual, because when this decision was made, it was an individual decision that was made. We weren't consulted about this decision, at least I wasn't. And so for people to take that on is absolutely insane to me. I personally stand with what the president did. Obviously, I am one of the few Democrats that serves and actually did criminal defense work. I know enough to know that this is not something that we normally do. And so this was an abnormal prosecution. And ultimately, I think that this is the type of circumstance that we do look for pardons for.
But it is an abnormal pardon as well, because it is not just for the offence of the tax issue or the gun. It is a pardon for anything he may have done over the past 10 years, i.e. from when he became a director of Burisma in Ukraine, because frankly, the only reason he got that directorship was because his surname was Biden, which is the argument you're making about the prosecution. Should Joe Biden now go on and say, well, Liz Cheney, there have been threats made against her, she should get a pardon. Jack Smith, he should get a pardon. Christopher Wray, currently the director of the FBI, he should get a pardon. I mean, where does it stop? If you think that the Trump administration is going to come after you, do you just pardon everyone and anyone?
Well, I will tell you that I absolutely would support the president expanding the pardons on some of these people that are considered to be political enemies, people that Trump campaigned and talked about. I mean, we are not living in normal times, and it's really sad, not just for the United States, but actually for the entire world. It is sad for our friends in the UK. It is sad for anyone that expects leadership and norms out of the United States, because we have someone who is going into office who looks up to the likes of Vladimir Putin, who looks up to the likes of Xi Jinping. He is someone who really is a danger to democracy as a whole. And so I do think that taking extraordinary steps is absolutely okay. I think that if we were looking at a normal transition, if we were looking at the old Republican Party where it's just a matter of disagreement in how to govern, but we still believed in governing, that would be one thing. But when you start to look at what he promised on the trail, and then you combine it with the people that he is positioning, then yeah, I think that we should consider extraordinary steps.
So, when Donald Trump was facing the hush money trial in New York, those 34 felony offences for which he was found guilty, just as you're saying in terms of Hunter Biden, there were many people who said that this should have been treated as a misdemeanor, that in no other case would it have been treated as a felony offence, i.e. with a potential imprisonment at the end of it if found guilty, that was also fixed. But I always took the view, frankly, look, he's judged by his peers. There was a prosecution. You make your defence. The prosecution make the case for the prosecution, at the end of which the jury reaches a verdict. And the jury reached a verdict in Donald Trump and said guilty. And they reached a verdict in Hunter Biden, which was also guilty. I think that can't you see why Donald Trump makes the argument that his was every bit as politically motivated as maybe Hunter Biden's?
I actually don't, for a couple of reasons. Number one, we know that that was a state prosecution. He consistently tried to say it was the Biden administration when it absolutely wasn't. It was a state prosecution. This wasn't someone that was appointed by President Biden or even someone that served under someone that was appointed by President Biden. Versus when we look at the Hunter Biden situation, we know that it was actually a Trump prosecutor. And really, in an effort to remain as transparent and to try to make sure that it didn't look like any impropriety, then the sitting attorney general, who was appointed by Joe Biden, allowed Trump's former prosecutor to stay on the case. So we have that part of it. That makes for a difference. Number two, we know that what Donald Trump did as it relates to the hush money trial is something that no one else had ever done. So yes, it was different. And when people are saying, well, it should have been this type of prosecution versus this one, this was actually a prosecution that was first of its kind of like the prosecutions as it relates to the insurrection. These are first of their kind because Donald Trump is a unique type of criminal. We have typically not had someone enter our presidency and use it this way. So I will tell you that the game has changed ever since 2016 when Donald Trump was first elected. And most of it has been because Donald Trump has decided that he would operate above the law.
Jasmine, just before we let you go, it's been a month now since the election. You were the co-chair of the 2024 campaign. Sometimes you make these kind of sort of rearview mirror statements about what happened or what went wrong or whatever, in the 24 hours afterwards. But with a month of reflection, where have you ended up? Where have you settled?
I don't know that I've taken the view that so many others have taken, and there's a lot of views out there. I think that I'm still processing. For me, a lot of things that people fail to point out is that, again, Donald Trump is a unique character. This is someone who, as far as I'm concerned, is not a Republican. There are plenty of Republicans that I get along with, that I work with, and we can actually function for the American people, even though we have different opinions about different things. The MAGA movement is different, and Donald Trump is different. And I personally believe that it's really important that you establish a brand. Whoever you are, whatever you're running for, you have to understand that this is about branding. And Donald Trump branded himself a long time ago. So as I was on the trail and I would hear people say things like, well, he's a successful businessman, so he'll be good for the economy. And I'm like, he's not a successful businessman. This is a guy who has filed for bankruptcy at least 6 times. This is a guy who has been found liable in court for fraudulent activity on the civil level and therefore is not allowed to operate a business in New York. But we could not get past this facade of what he had created over the decades.
Why? Why do you think it was so hard for Democrats to get past that facade, as you call it? After 8 years, why have the Democrats still not kind of worked out the formulation, the formula to deal with Trump?
I think that because he built that way before he ever ran for office, and then you're doing that versus a candidate where, yes, Kamala Harris was the vice president, But as far as a brand, when she first got into the race, people were saying, we don't really feel like we know her, right? And what that meant was she had not been branded. And she had 107 days to basically present, this is who I am as a brand to the American people. And I think doing that versus a guy who, from having his show as The Apprentice and other things, I think it was just really difficult. I think that the vice president did everything that she could in 107 days. And I think that she ran as hard as she could. She outran him. She ran circles around him. She was doing a lot more appearances, both when it came to media as well as in person. But she was behind. This is somebody that got in the race a lot later than Donald Trump. Theoretically, he had been running since prior to 2016.
You said you're still processing it. I've got to ask the question, should Joe Biden have got out of the way earlier and given her more time to define herself, more time to have the campaign ready, more time with clearer messaging?
I think that this is going to be kind of the debate that goes on for years and years and years to come. I can't
Your
say,
instinct?
I never was for the president getting out of the way at all. So I don't know.
You think he could have won?
I don't know. I think that it's a possibility because we do know that racism and misogyny played a role. So possibly, I don't know. I mean, here's the reality. People started freaking out about polls. People started freaking out about the debate, right? But we know that Donald Trump did one debate with Kamala Harris and he sat down and was like, I'm not going to debate her anymore. And it wasn't the end of him. We know that he ended up with 34 felony convictions and it wasn't the end of him. We know that he was found liable for sexual abuse as well as liable for defamation. It wasn't the end of him. You know why? Because his party stuck by him. They did not tear him apart. They stuck by him. And I can tell you that I personally do feel that the Democrats did more damage to our own team than help. And so, there's a lot of shoulda, coulda, wouldas. I don't know. What I do know is that we are walking in and Donald Trump is going to be the president of the United States. And he is a danger, not just for us in this country, but he is a danger worldwide. And I am going to do everything that I can to minimize the harm that potentially is coming to the American people, as well as our friends abroad.
Jasmine Crockett, it's fantastic to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks so
for your
much.
time.
I spoke to the president-elect this morning. He said, keep going, keep fighting, find your way.
So you're in this all the way.
Why would I back down? I've always been a fighter. I'm here for it.
Why would I back down? I've always been a fighter. The president is telling me to carry on. That is Donald Trump's embattled choice to be the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, in Congress this morning, trying to win over skeptical senators.
Yeah, and the reason he's embattled is because allegations have surfaced that recount how he paid money to a woman over accusations of sexual assault. He denies the actual sexual assault, but he has confirmed that he'd paid the money. And over the last week, the New York Times has published an email written by Pete Hegseth's mother to him back in 2018, essentially calling out his behaviour to women. The New York Times decided that if he was in the public arena, if he was going to be the head of defence, they had the right to go ahead and publish this private email, essentially, that a mother had written to her son saying, I don't like the kind of man you're becoming. She has since hit back at the media and said that her son has been changed, and she's actually gone on Fox and Friends and defended him and said, no, he is the right man for the job. But it has created this whole sense of, I guess, too much interest, too much limelight around a man who, yes, is a former veteran, but has for the last 10 years just been a news anchor on Fox and Friends at the weekend. What is he doing as Trump's pick for defence?
And of course, to be all importance of being earnest about this, to lose one cabinet pick is unfortunate. To lose another one, which would be following on from Matt Gaetz, if Pete Hegseth falls, would be pretty calamitous and would show that Donald Trump is not all powerful. And so the question is, does Donald Trump expend huge amounts of political capital to try and keep him there, or does he accept that the game may be up for him?
And Ron DeSantis might come into that place. He's already, of course, lost Matt Gaetz, who he wanted to put into the position of Attorney General. Matt Gaetz also faced the allegations of sexual abuse, who withdrew his nomination after it became clear that there wouldn't be enough senators to confirm him in that post.
Well, delighted to be joined now.
Not just delighted, but giddy. Yeah.
Giddy to be. God, we're really going for it.
Yeah.
Giddy to be joined now by Mike Murphy, who is a Republican operative of long-standing, worked very closely with John McCain, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, presents the absolutely brilliant podcast Hacks on Tap, and is someone, when I was living in America, was the person who always made sense of it for me. So, Mike Murphy, it's absolutely a joy to have you on our little podcast, on our humble little podcast.
Shut up.
Look, where are we now with the shape of the Trump cabinet? And in particular, is his choice as Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, running into the sand?
Well, personally, looking at the cabinet choices, where I am now, first is very happy to be on your tremendous podcast. Thank you for having me. But I'm on my way to the Portuguese embassy to get my immigration visa, because this is like a bad dream here for us old traditional Republicans. Hegseth is in trouble. The Trump folks had a plan to kind of flood the zone and intimidate, to get as many of their pure loyalists, regardless of qualifications or moral compass or any of those formally important things. And now, one by one, they're falling. Of course, we saw Matt Gaetz get polled. And, when somebody is polled, it's basically somebody goes to Trump and says, you're going to look bad if we keep pushing. Superman may not be able to lift up the locomotive. You may lose. Boom, he's gone. Now Hegseth is on the chopping block. I mean, his own mother won't vote to confirm him. That's a pretty good tell that things are going in the ditch, and they're starting to tee up other people. I would say, though, the biggest normie, as we say now, the kids, panic is over Kash Patel for FBI, because ever since the Hoover era, we've been very careful with the FBI. I remember I was in Russia back in the early 80s, and I was being teased by a Russian friend about, you Americans always complain about the KGB. Well, you have a plainclothes national police force that can arrest anybody anywhere called the FBI. We've always been very shy about that, about politicizing it. And now the craziest potential big appointment and the most powerful and scary agency are being combined. So a lot of the focus now is moving from Hegseth to the Kash Patel thing. Those are the big three.
Just tell us about Kash Patel, because I'm sure there are an awful lot of people who are listening to this who have no idea who he is.
Yeah, he's going to get famous. We can only hope that it'll be in the rearview mirror. So Kash Patel was a Republican staffer on the Hill on some of the congressional committees, which is a breeding ground for young, ambitious staff people with big appetites and limited power. The House really doesn't have much to do other than pontificate on foreign policy. The Senate's a lot more important. But anyway, he was a bitter young staffer. Somebody was mean to him. He became a Trumpite. And, he is a talent for kind of sucking up to Trump. He worked in the Defense Department in a fairly important position during the first Trump administration, where he proceeded to terrify the career staffers, even Trump loyalists like Mike Pompeo, who would later run CIA. They couldn't stand him because he's a bomb thrower, as we say in American politics, and he's a bit irresponsible. And now, of course, after that horrible experience, he has a big chip on his shoulder. So he has spoken publicly, when he's not selling crypto coins and Trump fan merchandise, about literally, blowing up the Justice Department of all the career staff. Why do we need 7,000 people in the FBI? Well, ask Putin why we do. He would be a morale smasher in the building. It would be unlimited bureaucratic warfare, because they think they have a madman on top of an agency that has tremendous esprit de corps and a real culture of whatever we do, don't get a Kash Patel. And so here it is. This is literally Trump kind of throwing acid at the Mona Lisa of American law enforcement organizations. So it's really bad. And my guess is he will not get confirmed. But there are a lot of bureaucratic tricks where they don't fill the job and they make him an acting person. There are a lot of ways to kind of hack the system. So there's a lot of fear about him. There's also fear about Tulsi Gabbard, running what we call the DNI, which is the supervisory position for our intelligence not all of them, but we have many, but most, including CIA. So there are three really scary apples left. Hegseth for defense and Patel and, of course, Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, Hegseth, who's just said today that he's going to carry on the good fight. So we're kind of we're watching that one to see what actually happens. I guess the thing that we can't tell from this distance, Mike, I mean, we read the headlines and we hear some of the commentary, but we don't know how these choices are landing in kind of, whatever normal America is now. Do you think the people that voted for Trump, and that is nearly half of America, are saying, yeah, this is the kind of stuff we want. We want disruption. We want somebody to blow up the Hoover building. Bring it on. Or are people kind of hearing this and thinking, whoa, this wasn't part of the deal?
I think there's a little of that building. The American politics has become very tribal. It's all, I'm right, you're evil. So anything we do to you is good, makes us heroes. You've got to remember, though, the election was more a repudiation of Biden. I mean, nothing kills politicians like inflation. Yeah. You buy the same stuff every week or every month. It costs more. Fire the knuckleheads in charge. That was the mainspring of this election. So how much of this was actually a mandate? It's like in the generic, you're right. The people who voted for Trump, which was enough to win the election fair and square, they want change. They like the fact that Washington huffers and puffers don't like Trump. But the devil's in the details, and now we're seeing the details. It's like, Mike, would you like to lose 10 pounds? Yes. Congratulations. Tomorrow you're in the French Foreign Legion. You're going to hike through the desert now with a 50-pound pack getting screamed at in French. Well, wait a minute. I didn't sign up for that.
We're going to chop off your arm.
Yeah, wait a minute. So that's what's happening here. And I think, the problem, though, is the American electorate, like most electorates, is not what we would call detail obsessed. So, it's hard to follow all this. I do it for a living and I get a migraine after an hour. So there's a lag between when backlash happens. But look, watch the magic 4 senators. The Republicans are 3 ahead in the Senate. So if 4 say no, any of these nominees are dead. Right now, you got a couple who are inclined to be against all this. Lisa Murkowski from Alaska is actually an independent. Senator Collins from Maine, a more progressive state. And Mitch McConnell, who is no longer leader, but has 2 years left in his term. And, I can see him there sipping the mint julep, saying to one of his staffers, Jasper, bring me my cutting knife, because he does not like Trump at all.
He's Kentucky. Is he like pulling his hair out over the decision that he made after January the 6th not to go heavy on Trump?
Well, I don't speak for McConnell. I haven't spoken to him recently. I'm kind of a fan. But he's the least neurotic person in Washington, D.C., and he looks forward. And forward, it might be cutting time on Trump because he's no longer leader. He doesn't have the responsibility of looking out for the political interest of the whole caucus. Yeah. He's one senator with 2 years and a lot of power to inflict pain. So I think we go to a Faulkner vibe now, and Mitch is going to get a little Shakespearean revenge, is my bet. And there are a couple other real national security bulls, like Mike Rounds of South Dakota, who are speaking up. They don't like Trump's Putin,
the Tulsi Gabbard choice, right?
Oh yeah, all the career and serious intelligence people are, to use a technical phrase, batshit over Tulsi Gabbard. And then the defense people. I've worked as a consultant in the Defense Department. Every general above 3 stars is a Senate-level politician. There's always stress between the civilian leadership and the military. The big fight there is between the Air Force and Navy, over budget. Not unlike, I'm sure, what happens in the UK MOD. So the idea of a clown like this guy showing up there is horrifying to them, and they're very good at shutting people down. If I were Trump, I wouldn't only be worried about the politics. I'd be worried that this guy is going to be trying on uniforms while the military leadership is going to run circles around.
I'm struck by how much I am hearing about Elon Musk being in the president-elect's ear, and I kind of can't remember hearing the name J.D. Vance since the election.
Yeah. I can't decide whether that's really smart or really bad for Vance. It's kind of like working for Stalin. There's an old Russian joke that the second worst thing you could do in World War II as a general in the Red Army was lose a battle because you'd get shot. The worst thing you could do is win a big battle because you and your family would get shot. The leader doesn't like anybody else in the sunshine. So Vance might be, the minute Vance starts getting all the press, I'd be very worried if I were Vance. So we'll see. Meanwhile, Elon and Trump, that's a classic case of two scorpions in one bottle. I don't think the love affair is going to last because they're both solo acts, as we say in Hollywood, and Elon loves the spotlight. So we will see how that turns out. I give it about 160 days.
We'll count that. Mike Murphy, an absolute joy. Thank you so much for joining us on the News Agency.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here.
Before we go, we should just tell you that the orange one is due over here very shortly.
He is the president-elect.
He is. And he's coming to see not just Emmanuel Macron, the French president, but the newly refurbished, newly rebuilt Notre Dame. And all I can think about is that extraordinary handshake. Do you remember the Macron handshake? It was like a squid. It went on for about 40 seconds last time round.
But do you remember Donald Trump picking little bits of dandruff off Macron's collar and Trump saying, we've got to have you looking perfect? And
they had dinner in the Eiffel Tower, didn't they? Yeah.
Well, so anyway, so yes. So Macron and Donald Trump are firing up the bromance ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration on January the 20th. And of course, in France, it's raised a number of eyebrows when, of course, Donald Trump has not yet had his inauguration. He is only the president-elect, and yet already the French are rolling out the red carpet and have stolen a diplomatic march on all the other countries by getting him to be the first one to visit.
And Macron has called it, how's he described it? Starter for 10?
Go on.
A moment of truth. A moment
de vérité.
De vérité, which it probably won't be.
Which it probably won't be. Anyway, we'll look forward to seeing Donald Trump at Notre Dame on Saturday. Notre Dame. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
The News Agents USA.